Hi students, this is Mrs. Urano. I am here to help you out for your homework number 27. So I'm viewing currently the sheet I made for hints. Hopefully this is really helpful and just self-explanatory. After I made the hint sheet I realized maybe I don't need to make a video, but I said I would, so I will. I'm going to turn this hint sheet into an actual answer key with the final answers. Feel free to fast forward until I'm talking about the problem that you're stuck on, or just listen to the whole thing. Alright, sum of means addition, the sum of, so I'll do my parentheses, 1/2 t and 1/3 s. In the end I actually could take my parentheses off because there's nothing else involved. That's going to be my final answer. Or if I really wanted to, I could do something like 1/2 t like this and 1/3 s like this. Either way is fine. I'll box this one here. Number 2, 20 subtracted from. So I'm going to subtract 20 from something. I cannot combine these because they are not like terms. This is a constant, this is a variable term, so I'm done. Product of 5r and 7. So I'm going to multiply 5r times 7. And I'm going to remember that 5r is actually just 5 times r, so I just have 3 things being multiplied here. And divided by 15. So I'm going to go ahead and use the associative property. I'm going to multiply the 5 by the 7 to get 35. And then I'm going to multiply it by the r to get 35r. And it's over 15. I'm going to reduce by dividing the top and the bottom by 5. And 7r over 3, or it would be fine to have it be 7/3 r. It's going to be my final answer. 120% of the sum of, so w and 1/12 u. And again, the directions say simplify when you can. I can simplify this farther by distributing. So I'm going to have 1.2 w's and I'm going to have 1.2 1/12 u's. So 1.2 w's is easy to do. And let's see how we want to do this. I'll do 1.2 times 1/12 u like that. And then I'm going to rewrite, I'm going to show some scratch. 1.2 times 1 is that, and then 1 times 12 is that. Then I'm going to move the decimal over, and then I move that one over. That's the same as 12 over 120. And if I divide the top and the bottom by 12, I just get 1 over 10. So that's actually just 1/10. So where am I going to write my final answer here? Run out of space. 1.2 w's plus 1/10 u's. I'll leave it as a decimal as well. Sorry for the squishiness. I try to give you guys space on this sheet. Alright, 9/14 of 6x. And right away I'm just going to put this over 1 just to make it easier. I see my denominator there. Reduced by, so I'm going to reduce it. I'm going to make this smaller. I'm going to put these here even though I don't really need to because multiplication always comes before subtraction or order of operations. But here we go. Reduced by 10. Now, I'm going to do some cross-canceling to simplify before I multiply. I'm going to divide this by 2 and divide this by 2. And I don't think I can do any other simplifying there. So 9 times 3 is 27 times x. Over 7 times 1 is 7, and then I still have the minus 10. I can't reduce this any farther, so I'm going to leave it right like that. If you wrote 27/7 and then you kind of wrote x on the side, that'd be fine. There's my final answer. Number 6, sum of, so we're going to add x, and we're going to add 3/4 x, and we're going to add 90%. And actually, in this case, I'm going to write it as a fraction because we already have fractions here. So 90% would be 90 over 100. which is really the same as 9 over 10, so we'll just write it like that. 90% of z. I don't even have to write the multiplication there. I can just write it like that. All right. Combine like terms, simplify if I can. This is like 1x, and I'm adding 3/4 x to it. So that's 1 3/4 x. But remember, when there's variables, we don't like mixed numbers. So I'm actually going to make this a 4/4 x. And I'm going to leave the answer improper. I'm going to have 4/4 and 3 more fourths x, so I'm going to have 7/4 x all together. And 9/10 does not reduce. Z. Yay. Can't combine them anymore because there are no more like terms. Moving on here, I already gave a lot of hint. If you want to pause and read this, you can. But the only thing I didn't do in my hint is to simplify by distributing. So I'm going to distribute the 3/4 to both terms. I'm going to get 3/4 of 8u, and I'm going to have 3/4 of the negative 12. Don't forget your negatives. I'm going to put these over 1 because that's easier when multiplying. I'm going to divide by 4 here, and I'm going to divide by 4 here. I'm going to just put the negative there. 3 times 2 times u is 6u, and 3 times a negative 3, and there's no variable, is negative 9. Or you could write it as 6u minus 9. Again, here I made a lot of hints already, so go ahead and pause if you want to think through this and read this. But I end up saying that we need to divide by 6, so I'm going to take this and divide by 6. And I'm going to remember, like we talked about in class, and by the way, I did post the class notes that I took. I didn't want you guys to take any notes last class, right? I let you use a whiteboard, and I mostly had you really focus on what I was saying rather than worry about writing it down. But I did post a copy of my class notes and for you to print out. So anyway, one thing we pointed out was we have to divide both of these terms by 6. So the 10t is being divided by 6, and I'll say it this way, and the negative 4 is being divided by 6. So to reduce this, we have 5/3 t. And I'm just going to, instead of plus and minus, I'm just going to make it minus a positive number, 2/3. This is the final answer. I kind of like the idea, honestly, of factoring out a 1/3. Then we'd be left with 5t minus 2, but not at all required. I think this is the way it's in the answer key. All right, moving on. I hope you all are having a good Friday. I am, but I'm needing to check my text because I'm about to go somewhere. All right, moving on. 11 notebooks were added to W notebooks. So we had W, and then we added 11 more. And then 7 friends shared them. So we're just going to take all that and divide it by 7. Now notice when I did this divided by, I don't need parentheses there because in a sense my division symbol is grouping everything on the top together and everything on the bottom together. If I really wanted, I'm just going to box this, except what's my units? Do I have units here? And actually that reminds me, units. Let's go back. Units, units. All right, for number 7, which was a word problem, my units were inches. So this is going to be inches. Number 8, the question was how many fluid ounces. So it's going to be this many fluid ounces. OZ is an abbreviation for ounces. All right, moving on. Units are here. Notebooks. All right, if you really wanted to divide each of the terms by 7, there's 2 terms on top, you could divide each of them by 7. But I don't know, that's slightly messier maybe, but that would work as well. All right, again, pause and look at my hints here to understand those. but the only step left to do after that is the total cost. Means we're going to add Q apples would be 25 cents times however many apples there are. So we're going to add them all together. The total cost is going to be the cost of the pears and the cost of the apples. P and Q are so similar. Be careful you write them correctly. And that's all going to be in dollars as my unit. So there we go. Again, please do pause and look through the hint so that this makes sense to you. But once we've got there, we know what 1 unit is. Remember, we always want to write what 1 unit is and literally write it out 1 unit equals. And then we're being asked for the number of pencils, so this would be my question mark here, how many's there. And the number of pencils, well, I know that's 5 units, so I know that's 5 of the 1 units. 5 Q over 7s. Now it's a little bit weird to leave it like that, so let's go ahead and kind of effectively multiply. 5 times Q is 5Q, and 1 times 7 is 7. Our units are pencils. And if you wanted to, again, this is just kind of simple algebra to just bring the Q out in front. 5/7 times Q, same exact thing. If that's confusing, let's make sure to talk about why that is. All right, pause and take a look at my hints, please. So now if we want the number of children, there are 5 units here. 1 unit is y plus 5 over 8 because there's 8 units altogether. So if I want 5 units, that's going to be y plus 5 over 8 times 5, right? Now there's a couple ways you could do this. You could distribute the 5, so you get 5y plus 25 over 8. And then you could even write it, I guess the question is which way is best to leave it at, right? But I mean, you could write it as 5y over 8 plus 25 over 8. We could even change this into a mixed number if we wanted to, because it's not connected with the variable. I think my favorite way to write it is just to leave the y plus 5 by itself. But this would be acceptable, this would be acceptable, this would even be acceptable. But I like it when the 5 times the 5 and the divided by 8 is out in front there. Is that legible? I hope so, I'm sorry. But any of those are acceptable answers. My unit is the number of children, so this many children. And we did this one in class, right? All right, almost done. Number 13. This is how much the items cost. This was the tax on the items. So how much did he pay for everything, for the items including the tax? Well, he paid W plus 120. And he paid 8% of W plus 120. So I actually like to solve this in a different way, but this way works as well. So I'm going to do it this way first. So we have a W plus 120 plus 0.08 W's, or 800ths I should say is the proper way to read that number, plus 800ths of 120. And we could go ahead and multiply that together. We'd end up having W plus 0.08 W's, so we'd have 1 and 800ths W's all together, combining our like terms. And we're going to have 1 120 and 800ths 120, so we actually have 1 and 800ths 120s all together. You see how I did that? That was crazy. So we could go ahead and multiply this. My favorite way is actually, in a sense, guys, look at this. It's to factor out the 1 and 800ths. So if we factor that out, we've got a W and we've got 120. My units is dollars. So this is the answer I personally like the best. Again, you can go ahead and do this multiplication, that's just fine. One of the reasons I like this is that it makes intuitive sense. and I believe this is what was in the answer key as well. If you distribute, that's completely fine as long as you do that math correctly. But one of the reasons I like this is it actually makes intuitive sense if you go back and read the question. We have what he paid for all the items, and we have an extra 8%. So he's actually going to be paying 100% of the items, right, and 8% of the items. So he's really just paying 108% of the items altogether. Do you see how this matches? So that's the intuitive sense that makes sense to me. And lastly, again, please, when I make videos, pause as much as you need to. I'm going to go quickly in the interest of time, though, in the interest of my time. All right. So, again, please pause and look at all my notes. Did you pause? Pause. All right. And now to find the average, I'm going to add Emily's plus John's. So that's Emily's. Here's John's. We have to write the 5u twice because this is Emily's and this is John's. And we're going to divide it all by 2. So in my numerator, which I'm going to focus on first because this is a grouping symbol, in PEMDAS this is kind of like the P. In a sense, there's parentheses up here because of this grouping symbol of the division bar. I'm going to combine my like terms and get 10u. And then, this is going to be interesting. 10u divided by 2 is 5u. And then remember, this divided by 2 is, I'm going to write it like this, 8/13. Divided by 2, I'm going to change it to be multiplying by the reciprocal. Okay, so I divided this by 2 already. 10 divided by 2 is 5. And now I'm dividing this by 2 by actually multiplying by the reciprocal. So my final answer is going to be 5u. Let's do some cross-canceling to simplify first. Divided by 2, divided by 2, and so it's 4/13. Another way to think about that, folks, is we have 8/13, and we're dividing it by 2. We only want half of them, right? We actually have negative 8/13. Don't forget the minus sign here. But if we want if there's 8 of them, and we want half, then we're only going to have 4 of them, because half of 8 is 4, right? 4 of them. The denominator stays the same. And my units are game cards. So 5u minus 4 over 13 game cards. Hopefully hearing me talking out loud about my thought process is helpful. Although your thought processes might be different. Yay, we're done! Good job, guys. Have a great, great, great Thanksgiving break.